So I'd like to welcome everybody to this joint meeting of the City Council and also the Planning Commission, adjourned meeting for the City Council, and I guess a special meeting of the Planning Commission of this workshop to discuss the housing element of the general plan. So what we'll do is we'll take roll call of both groups, and I'll ask Andrea to take the roll call, please.
Mayor Dutray,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Rue,
Present.
Councilmember Johnson,
I'm here.
Councilmember Martinez, Councilmember Martinez. I think you're muted.
I'm here. Sorry about that.
Okay. Councilmember Lopez,
Here.
and then for the Planning Commission, Chair Rowley,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Martinez. See if he can unmute himself. Are you there? Oh. Vice Chair
I'm
Martinez?
sorry, Manny is here.
Okay, thank you.
Here.
Commissioner
thank you.
Sagoon?
Did I hear Sagoon?
Yes.
Present.
Commissioner Eaton,
Present.
Commissioner Sanchez.
Present.
Thank you. That's everyone.
Okay. So I wanted to say welcome to our planning commissioners to this joint meeting. And I'm going to hand this over to staff. I understand that this is a workshop that includes members of the public. So I believe our consultants will have Q&As where it allows both us here and members of the public to speak. But I'll hand it over to staff and they'll take it over.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council and Planning Commission. Tonight we'll be having a community workshop pertaining to the housing element of the general plan. And as you may recall, at the City Council meeting of April 16, 2018, the City Council approved agreement number 18-10, a professional service agreement with Rangwala Associates for update to the Montclair general plan. As a reminder, the general plan serves as a basis for decisions that affect all aspects of our daily lives, such as parks, neighborhoods, recreation, community facilities, transportation, the environment, public health and safety, and education. A general plan is a strategic and long-term document identifying goals and policies that guide and direct the city in terms of implementing policies, programs, and resources. Adoption of a general plan fulfills the requirements of the California Government Code Section 65300, requiring local preparation, and adoption of general plans. The general plan addresses 7 mandatory elements of the California Government Code, which are land use, circulation, housing, open space, conservation, safety, and noise. The state recommends that a general plan be updated and adopted every 15 years. As a reminder, the City of Montclair has hosted a series of workshops, charrettes, and focus group meetings over the past 2 years, seeking input from our elected officials, stakeholders, business leaders, and the general public pertaining to the various elements of the general plan and their vision for the future of Montclair. Tonight, the City of Montclair is hosting a community workshop to discuss the state-mandated housing element portion of the general plan. The housing element identifies housing-specific needs in Montclair and describes the approaches the city will take to facilitate meeting those needs. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to inform our elected officials, stakeholders, and the general public about the update process and to receive any comments pertaining to the housing element. I would like to thank Community Development Director / City Engineer Mike Diaz, Deputy Economic and Community Development Director Christine Caldwell, Economic Development Coordinator / Housing Associate Tylen Martin, and City Manager Edward Starr for their involvement in the housing element. Tonight's presentation will be conducted by Sarah Walker, Senior Manager of the National Community Renaissance, also known as the National Core, as well as Kaiser Rangwala from Rangwala Associates, who's been spearheading the general plan development, if there's any questions for him as well. And with that, I will let Sarah begin her presentation.
Thank you, Mikey. That was Mikey Fuentes, just the presentation.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council and the Planning Commission. My name is Sarah Walker, and I am a Senior Project Manager with National Community Renaissance. Sorry, before I start, I just want to make sure you guys are seeing the slides only.
Yes.
Hi, Sarah. We're seeing both the slides and then your notes as well.
Okay, how about now?
Yes, we're good. Or it's cut off a little bit.
Okay. Okay. Is it looking okay? Sorry.
It's still cut off a little bit on the left-hand side, so we're only seeing 3/4 of the presentation.
Oh, okay. I apologize. The wonders of Zoom. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Hello?
Okay.
Perfect. We can see it now, Sarah.
Okay, great. Okay. I apologize for that. The wonders of Zoom.
And that's okay. No worries. We know how technology can be from time to time.
All right, thank you for bearing with me. All right, well, thank you so much for having me. So I am here tonight to talk about the housing element and to give you an overview of what the housing element is, what it contains, how the regional housing needs allocation works, a brief overview of city demographics as they relate to housing, some of the updates that have happened with housing legislation, the benefits of achieving housing element certification, and what the next steps are for the update process. So as Mikey was explaining, the housing element is one of the 7 mandated general plan elements. And the housing element is a policy document that is designed to evaluate housing needs and identify programs that can be used to guide city actions with regard to housing. And the housing element is unique because it is one of the only elements that is required by law to be updated every 8 years, and it is the only element that must be certified by the state. So the City of Montclair's housing element, their current element was adopted in 2014. That element was for the 5th planning cycle, and it addressed the years 2014 to 2021. The city is now updating the housing element for the 6th planning period, which will cover the years 2021 to 2029. And this element must be completed and approved ideally by October 15th of this year. So the City of Montclair's housing element is broken down into 6 sections. The introduction serves as a window into the document and provides a high-level summary of all of the requirements and the consistency with the other general plan elements, as well as information on public participation. The housing plan includes goals and policy actions focused on housing. The community profile provides a detailed breakdown of demographic information in the city, such as population trends, employment, household characteristics, and it also looks at special needs groups, such as the elderly, single-parent households, homeless, and developmentally disabled. The housing constraints section analyzes governmental constraints, such as zoning or processing times for permits, as well as non-governmental constraints, which can be things like land costs or market trends, and how they impact the development of housing. The housing resources section includes an analysis of funding sources as well as land resources that are available in the city, including a detailed sites inventory. And finally, a progress report analyzes the progress the city made in implementing the previous housing element for the 2014 to 2021 planning period. So what drives the housing element update process is the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA. The RHNA begins up at the state with the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. They allocate units down to the Regional Association of Governments, which for Montclair is the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG. SCAG is then responsible for developing a methodology for allocating units amongst their member jurisdictions. And so every jurisdiction is essentially allocated their fair share of units and is responsible to plan for those units through the housing element. So for the 2021 to 2029 planning period, Montclair was assigned 2,586 housing units. And this includes, this is broken down into 4 income categories. So it includes 696 units for very low income households, which are those earning below 50% of the area median income or below. 382 units for low income households earning between 51 and 80% of the area median income. 398 units for moderate income households earning between 81 and 120% of the area median income, and 1,100 units that are above moderate or essentially market rate housing. So the state does recognize that cities are typically not housing developers, and that the city's responsibility is to create opportunities in their land use plan to remove constraints and to facilitate residential development through their policies. So with the RHNA, the state has been particularly focused on the development of deed-restricted housing for low and very low income households. For the 2021 to 2029 planning period, the city has had the unique opportunity of planning ahead through the general plan update to identify opportunity areas for higher density development. And so to ensure that the housing element is consistent with the city's new land use plan, which is found in our well-planned communities chapter of the general plan, the land inventory for the housing resources section will largely focus on the downtown and major corridors, areas where the city is already identified as areas that can accommodate higher density and are zoned appropriately to accommodate what the state has identified as the minimum density of 30 dwelling units per acre to accommodate lower income units. Doing so, this ensures the preservation of existing well-established neighborhoods and locating higher density housing near transit, jobs, services, and amenities, which typically is what is required to have a successful financing application for affordable housing anyway. So in addition to looking at need based on income, the state also requires that the city look at specific population groups and demographic information. So I wanted to just briefly share what we were seeing in the 2019 American Community Survey report. The city has grown to include just over 40,400 residents that live in approximately 10,800 households. This equates to an average household size of roughly 3.8 persons per unit. In the city, approximately 26% of households have more than 5 members, which would classify them as a large household. 18% are female-headed households, and approximately 26% are elderly household, where the primary householder is over the age of 65. Additionally, the San Bernardino County 2020 point in time survey did find 54 unsheltered homeless individuals in the city. All of these specific groups face unique barriers to finding affordable housing and may need additional assistance, which can be addressed through the city's housing plan. So since the last housing element update, there have been a number of legislative changes that have passed and we will need to incorporate into the housing element document. What we are generally seeing is the state is requiring more accountability and oversight in housing development. And I just wanted to highlight a few that I felt like were most kind of important to our current update. The first is AB 1397, AB 1486, and SB 6. And with this, the state has changed the format of the required sites inventory. They've developed their own template that we have to put the information into. They've also increased the level of scrutiny, the land that is suitable and available for residential development to meet the city's RHNA obligation. AB 686 requires that all housing elements now include a program to affirmatively further fair housing and promote housing opportunities throughout the community for all protected classes. And SB 166 is the no net loss rule or law, which requires jurisdictions to maintain an inventory of sufficient adequate sites that can meet their remaining unmet housing needs based on their RHNA, especially for lower and moderate income households. And basically what that means is that if the city identifies sites that are zoned appropriately for lower income housing, and that site ends up being developed by a market rate development, the city still needs to show that they have an inventory of appropriately zoned land to accommodate the rest of their lower income RENA. So I wanted to quickly go over why it's important for the city to maintain a certified housing element. It allows for timely access to state infrastructure bonds, capital improvement projects. It ensures that developers are eligible for state funding. For example, the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities, or ASIC program that is available from cap and trade funding. One of the threshold items is whether the city has a certified housing element in order for a developer to pursue that type of funding for a project within the city. It also allows access to CDBG and home funds. It achieves jobs housing balance, reducing traffic impacts and retaining a local employment base. It also allows the city to direct growth within the community, planning for density within appropriate areas. If the housing element is found to be out of compliance or not certified, the general plan technically is deemed incomplete or invalid. It could open the city up to lawsuits, and the worst case scenario is that the state is actually allowed to take over the planning department and approve projects. So the housing element update process has consisted of 3 phases. Over the last few months, we've been looking at demographic data, reviewing the city's progress in implementing the 2014 to 2021 housing element. We're conducting our community outreach now through this meeting. We have a survey available on the city's website and on social media. And we're providing informational materials as well on the city's website for people that aren't able to attend the meeting or would like to learn more about the housing element. In the next phase, we'll be working over the next month or so to incorporate community input and create an administrative draft of the housing element. And that will be sent up to the state for their compliance review. The state has up to 60 days to review the element and provide comments on whether the draft meets all of the statutory requirements. While the document is under review, the required CEQA analysis will be completed as part of the larger general plan EIR. And once we get the draft back from HCD, we will address any comments they may have. And then we will return in front of the Planning Commission and Council for the adoption hearings. Once the draft is adopted, it will go back up to the state for their final compliance or their final certification review. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions that you may have, and I appreciate you having me tonight.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for that presentation that you just presented. So I'd like to go in order first to see, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay. If there's any members of the public who have any comments they'd like to make, then possibly go to the Planning Commission, then the City Council, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Take a lead.
My phone went on. So if there's any members of the public who would like to speak, they could just raise their hand, and if they're on their phone, they can push *6, I believe.
It was *9 to raise your hand.
*9, sorry. Thank you, Andrea. If there's no members of the public who would like to speak, we would move to the Planning Commission. Oh, we have one individual right now. Go ahead, Tuan.
Hi. Thank you, Sarah, for that presentation. The question that I have is regarding the community survey that was conducted. I just wanted to know, in terms of demographic information, which variable category was decided in terms of how information are collected about the population of Montclair, and how certain information may not have been collected, just because I know, for example, like just looking at the brief slide that you presented, there wasn't any information regarding, for example, types of families that live in Montclair, such as LGBTQ folks. And then another thing that I wanted to know also, and this could also go to the city officials as well, is in terms of determining zoning for where certain housings will be constructed, like how are those zoning areas decided in terms of where low affordable housing will be placed? Thank you.
Yes, Juan, the information that we did use for the slides was conducted by the American Community Survey. So it was similar to the survey that was conducted for the census. So it was done at the state level. That was just the information that we received from them. I don't believe that they do collect information on housing for LGBTQ members. That's something that we could dive into a little bit more and see if that information is provided so that we can have those stats. But I do know that we are also doing our own survey that we have been promoting on our city's website as well as social media accounts, asking more particular questions for actual residents in the community towards what they would like to see, the type of housing that they live in, how many members make up their housing, their family, et cetera, so we can get a little bit more nuanced information that's more particular and germane to the city of Montclair versus one that was just conducted on such a wide scale.
Mikey, can I add to that? I want Mayor, members of the City Council and Planning Commissioners and members of the public, to answer the specific question about demographics. As part of the general plan effort, the city conducted a market study, and I want to encourage you to go to the city's planning website, either the Montclair general plan website or the city's website. And you will see in there a presentation and a detailed report giving a breakdown of the different social and demographic profiles within the community. So that was assessed, and as Mikey correctly pointed out, there were various variety of sources, American Community Survey being one of them, that were used to profile the housing that became the basis for what Sarah's work is now building off of. So there was a detailed market analysis done a year ago, and that is now available online. And if you send us your contact information, we'll also send you a link. Thank you.
And then Juan, could you repeat your second question that you had?
Yeah, I was just curious regarding, because there was a brief mention about zoning in terms of where certain housings are placed in the city. And I know right now there's a lot of focus on developing North Montclair in the downtown area, and it's very clear that there's a lot of new housing constructed up there. And so I was just wondering how zoning are decided in terms of where to place certain types of housing, such as like affordable housing.
Okay, so for this, this is actually part of this meeting. So we're taking comments from the public where, in terms of where they would think affordable housing, would occur. As the city is mostly built out, we're looking at incorporating affordable housing in all aspects in the new areas that are being developed. So for instance, in the north, as part of the TOD, we're looking at also including affordable housing in that area, which is really critical, since it would be close to major transit stops that would, encourage and provide low-income residents another alternative and means for transportation. So we're looking at it very holistically and looking at various sites within the city that we could include affordable housing as part of a larger development project. If there's no other members of the public that have any comments, I would like to move to the planning commissioners. Are there any members of the Planning Commission that have any comments that they would like to make regarding the housing element or housing in general?
I have a quick question. I'm not sure if it's for Sarah. By the way, thank you for the presentation, or Mikey, or even Kaiser. How do we determine, or the city determine, what low to moderate affordable housing, the land itself? How do we determine, or you guys determine that pricing, or which land is affordable and which is not?
I'm happy to try to answer that. So with the housing element and the sites inventory, at least, the way that it's done is purely based on density at this point. So sites that have a minimum or allow 30 dwelling units per acre or higher can be identified as potential sites for lower income housing. That state has found that in order to accommodate lower income housing, there's a nexus with density. And so that's how those sites are essentially identified, is purely based on kind of the available density or the allowable density on those sites.
Council member, the specific numbers are based on average median income. So, for example, 30% of average median income, whatever that number is. And Sarah, what was the number for Montclair? The average median income? Do you know?
It's like 57,000.
So 57,000. So about 30% of that is considered to be affordable. That's what's held as average median income. So anything that, if you're paying more than 30%, if you're paying 50%, or if you're paying greater amount, then it's considered to be unaffordable. So the state has special classifications based on your average median income for housing. And that's what determines the specific classification of whether it's low income or medium income or at market rate.
Are there any other planning commissioners that have any questions or comments that they would like to make at this time? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to move to the City Council for any questions or comments that they would have as well.
I have a comment for Sarah. First, I want to thank you for the presentation that you gave us tonight. It was pretty comprehensive. But I'd also like, if you haven't already done so, can you please provide a copy to staff? I'd like to get a copy in my hands to review for my future reference.
Councilmember Johnson, we can certainly make those copies available, and I'll also make those copies available to the Planning Commission as well.
Excellent, excellent. And then one last question I have for Sarah, or it might for Sarah or Kaiser, I'm not sure which of you can answer this, but when we are looking at new developments, my thought process, and please correct me if I'm wrong, my thought process is that we could address some of the availability of the units based on their size. So that, you know, if we have a multifamily unit, they're not all 4 bedrooms. But you know, one could be a 4 or 3 or 2 or studio, so that there are there's an array of prices that people would pay, so that could address, so that we could kind of be blended. One of the things I'm really proud of for the city of Montclair, when you drive up and down the street or walk through our neighborhoods, you don't know who's who. You don't know that one house is a millionaire and one house is a low moderate and the next house is middle income, because we're all kind of blended. And so I'm hoping that our new development would be consistent with that model. Am I on target, or am I off track?
No, I think in theory, you're definitely on. And, you know, to be just honest about, you know, the financing and the way that affordable housing tends to work, for example, with the low income housing tax credit programs, there's senior projects and there's family projects. And those family projects, there actually is a specific percentage of units that have to be a certain size. So at least 20% have to be 3-bedroom and at least 25% have to be 2-bedroom. And so there are already kind of built into a lot of the financing that's out there for affordable housing. There are those types of requirements already built in. And then, I mean, in terms of the mix of affordability, that tends to be something that obviously depends on the project and depends on the developer, but can be something that the city can work with the developers on to kind of work on how the mix looks for affordability.
Thank you.
And just to add to Sarah's comment, the city is also working on our inclusionary housing ordinance. So that will, once completed, will make sure that certain developments going forward set aside a certain amount of units for low, moderate income, and extremely low. So that will also help with allowing us to meet our RENA goals for that, and also providing affordable housing. But just to your point, Councilmember Johnson, there have been numerous studies that do point to the fact that when you have low-income households, affordable households within neighborhoods that tend to have much higher resources, the students and the families that go there end up climbing up much higher in the socioeconomic ladder because they're given those opportunities just as their peers who have higher resources than they can actually afford. So it's something that's actually much more common in other countries where they do a mix of affordability with market demand. So there's not this concentration of, low-end projects as what people would think of in the early, 20th century. So it's actually a mix, so it helps provide resources, much needed resources to these families that don't have as much. And then the students in those families tend to do much better and climb up in the socioeconomic ladder, which is what, of course, we want to encourage, that these people can, get good jobs and then, end the cycle of poverty. And that's really important by, doing that and having that as part of, inclusionary housing ordinances. And that's one of the main goals of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also wanted to share that as part of the affirmatively furthering fair housing and the sites inventory, one of the other changes that's happened with the state is that they really want to see that the city there's maps that are available that show where in the city is considered to be a high resource area, that has good access to amenities, good schools, is very walkable. And they are looking now to see that the city is not just putting all the affordable housing into, a couple blocks, that it is somewhat distributed so that it's not concentrated in one area. So that was something that is something that we are talking to staff about and considering in our sites inventory.
Perfect.
Are there any other members of the council who have any comments or questions? Mr. Rue, go ahead. Councilmember Rue, excuse me.
Yes. In looking at these numbers, and it is to most of you no surprise that I'm a huge advocate of affordable housing. I do not believe it's just something that should be on paper. I believe it's a moral and ethical issue. If somebody is good enough to work in this community, they're good enough to live in this community. I hear all the time people complain about their neighbor, how many people are crowded into that house. Look at those people over there. All these people crowded in one house. The reason is because these families have nothing that is affordable. When I look at the numbers, and I'm doing some quick mathematics in my head, in the category of very low, low, and moderate, that's about 60% of all our numbers. We need to make sure that that's built. We cannot condemn people to forever be renters. We need to be able to find affordable ownership as well as rental. I think it's wrong when we say, oh, well, we'll do some inclusionary zoning. Well, that makes the rest of those units more expensive and pushes out other people who can't afford it now. It makes affordability worse, not better. I think we're condemning people when we say it's okay to rent a low to moderate income unit, but then when you cap out, please go somewhere else because we have no ownership available for you. We need to start looking at the process for the problem that it is. A family of 4, you've heard me say it, making $70,000 a year cannot afford to buy a home in this community. They're barely affording rent. And we need to think of those people. We need to think of those families when we do this. Tiny homes are, to me, a great solution to a small piece of the project. We need to look at that. I hope you will. But I hope we don't look at this as an exercise and then go willy-nilly, we're just going to make sure we have more expensive housing. People can't even afford the rent here. And when you talk about the cost, we need to look at things that are cost effective. Prefab or manufactured housing is very, very cost effective. It doesn't have to look as a traditional mobile home. In fact, many of the new mobile homes don't resemble what you and I would think of a mobile home to be. But prefab construction can be built on site, anchored to the ground, just as a regular home can be. You can turn around and make those available to people to buy. They don't have to be in a mobile home park community. They can be scattered around. These are ways to try to get some of that affordability in place, because I don't want to lose a generation who says, I can't afford to live here. And I'm condemned to a horrible commute from someplace way east of here to my job in Montclair. So we need to look at this. And I hope that these solutions, tiny homes, prefab construction, will come into it. There is a new bill in California. I had a whole bunch of stuff for tonight. I chose I'd be here all night, which I hope we take seriously and I hope we as a community will endorse. In California, we have a lot of communities doing inclusionary zoning, especially in multifamily type units. In many, many communities, the low to moderate income families are excluded from using the pools. They're excluded from using the clubhouse. That's wrong. They've been told you need a separate entrance. We shouldn't have to put a bill out there. And communities are actually fighting this. Cities are saying, no, it's wrong. We don't want you to have that bill. No, we should be supporting that bill. That's a form of discrimination. The other problem we face in many communities, when you build multifamily housing, the HOA fees, you may have your inclusionary units that are affordable to buy, but the HOA fees are such that those families can't afford the HOA fee. So we need to start thinking of this in a very holistic way. It's just an issue with me. If the bank teller, who's the single mom making minimum wage, she should be able to live in this community. The family of two working in a warehouse at $35,000 a year, that's $70,000. They should be able to afford to buy a home in this community, because $70,000 is a pretty good income. You're pretty much maxing out the Inland Empire, because the wages don't, average wages don't go much above $70,000. So these are just my comments. We'll keep it and end it for right now.
Councilmember Lopez?
Hi, thank you for the time. You can all hear me, correct? Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Sarah,
we can.
thank you. Sarah, being the new guy on the council, this is my first interaction with you, so appreciate the presentation and the time you put into it. My right honorable colleague beat me to the punch in requesting a copy of your presentation, so I would like to get that as well, please. Wanted to ask you, while you were doing your presentation, I was trying to look on my cell phone for the Senate bill number, but I do know the author. It is Senator Toni Atkins out of San Diego County. I believe she has a bill that, I could be wrong, but I think the gist of it is would allow private property owners the right to build additional units on property. I believe it's to maybe even smaller versions of homes on property. Wanted to see what your take was on that, what the chances of that bill passing, and if you know the bill number offhand, that'd be appreciated if you can tell me what that is. Second point, I wanted to confirm, you said that our median income here is $57,000, correct? For our residents? And regarding the inclusionary housing ordinance that staff and you are working on, when do you anticipate that being completed and brought to council? And then just one thing I noticed on one of the slides, the site where our present Montclair Place and the plaza is, I'll always call it the plaza since I've been here all my life. It'll always be the plaza to me. I can't get that ingrained out of me. I know the prior council had approved the tentative plans for redeveloping that site. It was in the press and whatnot. I'd like to see if we can, I'm bothered by that image of the plaza site already showing as developed and parceled out on that slide, because I would like to hold off, if you will, and see if that site can be salvaged. I know they're suffered some serious setbacks with COVID shutdowns and whatnot, but I'd like to see if with time, if that there could be some degree of salvaging the sites and those businesses in the plaza can thrive. If you can just touch on those points, I'd appreciate it. I might have some follow-ups depending on answers.
Yes, I can address some of those, Councilmember Lopez. As part of the look at the housing element, we are going to start developing accessory dwelling units. So one of the goals is that we will seek with help with one of our consultants to actually develop some pre-planned accessory dwelling units that will fit into the makeup of the existing single-family residential homes in Montclair. And by providing them like a template of 3 different types, it would allow them to just easily pick one. We would have the architecture already completed. We would have the zoning already completed. We would have all the necessary building plans prepared for that. So basically, you could just, if you want to, do a granny flat or, have your in-laws move in or whatever, you can just pick from one of those predetermined ADUs and already have that be approved for your single-family residential home and just have it plopped down. So that would eliminate a lot of the cost for residents who want to build those ADUs. So you could do an ADU and then a junior ADU, which would also be allowed. So that's kind of like a garage conversion type. So we're looking at that and developing a plan that would already allow residents to just basically pre-pick one and then plop it on their property, so that it would cut a lot of the planning and architectural review and design that a resident would have to do, and then they would just take that and go with whatever fits their needs. So it's one of the ways that the city's trying to ease the burden of housing issues and affordability by allowing that. And then to your point with the Montclair Place, the image that is shown is the built-out plan that for the Montclair Place specific plan that was developed. So that basically shows what the mall would look like if the actual plan came to fruition. And you have to keep in mind that the general plan, as well as the general plan is a 20-year plan. And then the plan that we have for the Montclair Place is also about a 20-year plan that could, go quicker or take a little more time, but that would be the actual end goal of that. You have to also keep in mind that the Montclair Place specific plan was designed to allow certain portions of the mall to continue existing to meet market demands, and provide flexibility to the owners of the mall, CIM, to keep portions of the mall, but also redevelop areas with higher density to also bring in, office uses, residential. So that is, a much longer plan span of, 20 years. And so that was just us showing the actual fully built out version of the plan if it were to really come into fruition as we see it, as well as the owners of the mall see it, CIM. And then the inclusionary housing, we are just beginning to start that process. We are working with our legal counsel, BBK, to actually begin the process of starting to develop the inclusionary housing. So I'm not sure how long that process will take, but I will provide updates to the city council to let them know how we're going, and of course present that to them before it's finalized or anything, so that we can get your input as well as the planning commission's input on the inclusionary ordinance.
Just
Councilmember Lopez, we do already have an inclusionary housing ordinance on the books, but it is way outdated, and we need to bring it up to current provisions under state law, as well as to address the economic side effects that the current ordinance does not truly address. So while we do have one in place, it is not one that is really beneficial to the community. So as Mr. Fuentes indicated, we are in the process of moving forward to update that ordinance and bring a new one to the city council. We are waiting for some legislation to clarify what needs to be done because the state is always introducing new housing legislation on an annual basis, and the inclusionary housing provisions are an area that they continue to examine. So we may have to wait a little while longer to see what direction the state may go, or we will move forward with working on one to bring it to the council's consideration.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Starr and Mr. Fuentes. My concern with respect, I understood that ADUs and junior ADUs were allowed because I believe the legislature 3 years ago, changed that, and Governor Newsom signed that into law. My concern was the present bill making its way through the legislature by Senator Atkins that would basically allow a property owner to divvy up more land and create smaller units or build upon existing, for example, the garages. I'm just concerned with that because I think obviously it takes away from local control. But anyhow, I just wanted to see, why don't we say this? If the city can, from this meeting, I'll try to find that bill number, but if staff finds it before me, great. Please bring it to my attention, but it is a Tony Atkins bill in the Senate. And I think it might be of concern, and it will relate to the numbers that we have with respect to the city. Other than that, I understand that the mall site graphic was just a vision of what would possibly come, but I do want just the flexibility with respect to CIM and trying to salvage as much of the present businesses we have there as possible. That's all I was saying. Thank you both for the explanations, and Sarah, thank you as well for the presentation, but I would like a copy of your PowerPoint, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to give that to you. And I believe the bill that you're referring to is SB 1120. And it was introduced last year and did not pass.
Okay, good.
I think they're trying again.
Maybe a gut and amend process?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I haven't looked at a recent version.
Okay, I'll inquire, but thank you for that.
Councilmember Lopez, I do want to remind you and the other members of the city council that under the specific plan approved by the city council and introduced by CIM, the long-term impact of the specific plan actually introduces more commercial to the site rather than less. So the plan is not intended to detract from the commercial element of Montclair Place. It does reconfigure it into a mixed-use pattern as part of the development process going forward. But as Mr. Fuentes also indicated, it is the intent of the owners of Montclair Place to retain as much of the existing mall as they possibly can. But based on market conditions and the direction that some of the stores may go, they may have to reconfigure the format as how they are existing within the plan as it ultimately is developed out. But long term, I believe there's an increase of somewhere in the neighborhood of about 350,000 square feet of additional commercial and retail market capabilities at the Montclair Place property.
Thank you, sir.
Ben, council member, if I may just very quickly, I think the bill you're referencing is SB 7, and I will send you a copy of it. I work on these every day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Let me lower the hand.
Well, thank you. Maybe I'll say some stuff right now. Yeah, the ADA law reference was adopted 2 years ago, and obviously allows what's called junior ADUs, garage conversions, and they can add a second unit. And I know here in the city of Montclair, we've had some existing housing stock I've already used the junior ADU garage conversions, and then we have two houses proposed on Palo Verde, which will have 3 units per lot under the ADUs. And the reason why the ADUs happened, why that was adopted years ago, is because our legislature, based on demands from the public, are finding ways to create more housing units in our cities. Cities, you can say maybe we're not as excited about housing because if you look at the property taxes received from housing and demands for services versus if you have retail, you get the cities get a little better bang for their dollar in terms of the general fund from non-housing. So that's. So, and of course, you have the NIMBYs that don't want housing around them, and then you have the issue of higher density housing. So there is a great deal of pressure, especially start with this governor, that we need to build more housing. This exercise we're doing, it's every 6-7 years, housing element. It's a document we will produce. Obviously, cities are not in the business to build housing. That's essentially in the private sector and the nonprofit housing sectors. They're the ones who build the housing, but we're supposed to provide the availability of the land use documents to allow for it. Obviously, we're supposed to provide the resources. We used to have what's called redevelopment at one point, which that was a funding resources that we were able to utilize, which we did very well in affordable housing in our community, and that is no longer available. So our role in terms of housing is to look at our zonings, where can we add housing, the density of the housing, and then obviously when we have developers that want to come in and want to build affordable housing, then we're required to work with them based on anywhere in the city that allows for housing. Any developer can walk in and propose affordable housing. We can't restrict a certain segment of the city for market rate housing and for affordable housing. A lot of history where we are right now on these numbers, these rental numbers we have with my experience through SBCTA and also serving on a SCAD committee. Originally, the numbers were most of the housing was going to be built in the Inland Empire in Riverside County and San Bernardino County because of land availability. And at that time, the SCAG Regional Council, Mayor Rusty Bailey from the city of Riverside, he came up with a proposal to focus housing more on areas where they are job rich and transit rich. And so essentially the county is Riverside County, delegates from Riverside County, this county, and also, believe it or not, from Los Angeles County agree with that proposal. So what happened was that more of the units proposed for the Inland Empire were shifted towards Los Angeles County and into Orange County, which is, you probably noticed there's a lot of objections in Orange County, especially on the coastal cities. I will say this, in San Bernardino County, when that shift took place, every city except one city, their numbers went down. We like to take a wild guess what city's numbers did not go down when the shift took place. City of Montclair, because of our transit we have right now in the city of Montclair. And I don't understand the methodology how that took place, but that's what occurred. About 4 or 5 years ago, there was a proposal to develop a property on Hope Boulevard, and there was the same developer. They also were looking to develop single-family homes on small lots on Central and also on Mission, which they're now completed. You'll notice that they have very small setbacks. And at that time, the city council felt that maybe we should slow down a little bit and began to start looking at the entire city. And as you notice, we've been working on updating our general plan. And part of that updated general plan is look at these areas. We have vacant land on Holt Central, for example, obviously Mission, where they're currently not zoned for residential. And does it make sense to convert those into a mixed use zone that you can have commercial and you can have housing? Well, one of the things that I'm also concerned these days that the brick and mortars, our shopping centers, not just this community, but many communities now, as e-commerce has gotten stronger, brick and mortars to suffer. And I think what we may start seeing is housing being built in commercial centers, and maybe again a mixture of those two. What I want to say is housing is very expensive these days. The cost of housing in Montclair, if you want to buy a house and built in 1950s, 1960s, 1,300, 1,400 square foot home minimum, you're looking at least half $500,000 to buy a home here in Montclair in the older part of the city. And then even the houses that were built here recently on very small lots, they're going over 400,000. So I think that we've done a really good job in our specific plans, the North Montclair specific plans. Obviously, this general plan we're working on right now to identify locations where houses take place. Montclair Place was brought up. I can't remember how many units there is, but we have an abundance, a number of residential units proposed that 2 years ago we were not able to build housing there, and it was a mixed use component. So I feel very comfortable where we're going right now in terms of trying to meet our arena numbers. I think we've done a lot already. We've done a lot in North Montclair with high density housing. And that's why when the numbers did not shift down from Montclair, I wasn't too concerned about it because I knew what we were already doing. So I think what as a city we need to do is move forward, adopt our housing element plan, stay focused on what we've been doing already through our specific plans, and then make sure we're in compliance with the state of California and everybody's happy with us. And then as developers come in, we will work with them with the confined of our zonings and our specific plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And with that, I would like to thank Sarah Walker for her presentation that she conducted this evening, as well as Kaiser Rangwala. And then I would also like to thank the Planning Commission, as well as the City Council for their attendance in this meeting. And I will make sure to provide copies of Sarah's presentation to both the Planning Commission and City Council, as well as we will continue promoting the survey for the residents pertaining to the housing element, and we'll make sure to post those both on our city website as well as our social media accounts. And with that, I would like to thank everyone for their attendance, and I hope they have a good evening.
Not quite yet. Not quite yet. We're not quite done yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not quite done yet. If we're done with the workshop, we do have public comment. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak. They have 5 minutes. So are there members of the public who wish to speak? Andrea, do you have any request?
I just see Tuan is his hands up. I'm not sure if
Okay.
he wants to speak again, but
Okay, Tuan, if you wish to speak.
Yes. First of all, just thank you for
5
hosting
minutes.
this. Okay, sounds good. Thank you for hosting this workshop. I've been coming to these meetings just a year now, actually, and so just really great to be learning about the processes in which how our city's being developed.
Hold on, Tuan. Hold on, Tuan. Hold on. Everybody, please mute yourself, please. Get a lot of back. Okay, go ahead, Tuan. Go ahead.
Okay. So just thank you for continuing hosting these and including members of the public such as myself, and then also to Council Member Rue. It's really nice because it is true. Like in the last year that I've been attending this meeting, the one person that consistently bring up affordable housing has been Council Member Rue, which I appreciate, just because my family and I are immigrants. We came here in '93, and the first home that we had was a small little apartment near Kinsley and Central. And then over the years, we gradually started renting a home, and then now finally, owning our own family home. But I definitely have a very firsthand experience in terms of the importance of affordable housing. And so just really greatly appreciate Councilmember Rue constantly bringing that up. But to that point, one thing that I do want to ask, just for, again, I'm just here to learn about the processes, is there's a lot of focus in terms of North Montclair developing, and not just the mall, but all the housings and attracting businesses to that area. I know just this last year, I know this has been going on for years, even before I started participating, but just this last year alone, you know, we definitely seen an increase in conversation, even in our Facebook community, for example, up about North Montclair. So my question is, because there's so much focus on North Montclair and all the housing developments up there, and we also know that in South Montclair, particularly off of Kinsley, there's a lot of low-income families and these apartments, you know, these dense apartments around the Kinsley, Ramona, between Orchard and Ramona. They, over the years, at least for me, as I drive past that area, it just seems like we're not taking care of that section of our city in terms of investments, in terms of development, in terms of aesthetic. I mean, just the list can go on, right? And I don't know much because, again, I'm just a public of the member, just learning as I attend these meetings. And so I wanted to know, how are you in terms of part of this housing element plan workshop or in any other types of city strategies that you are doing in terms of also focusing on those housing and developing that section of the city and you know, making sure that those residents have affordable access, that they have clean housing as well, and that we're also developing our city in a way where we have them in mind, where we're not going to increase costs and as a result displacing long-term residents who may not be homeowners but have lived in the city for a generation, but mostly in these apartment housing. That's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I was just wanting, maybe Mikey, if you want to reach out to Michael Fuentes, we have a lot of history in that part of town. At one point it was called Machine Gun Alley about 30 years ago. I think some of us remember that. And the city has done a lot of investment there with our CDBG funds. I know the city owns several units in that area. And I would suggest, Mikey, if you can reach out to Tuan and perhaps he can meet with you and you can discuss some of his questions he has. So with that, I know there is a CAC meeting, I understand, getting ready to start. So I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to all for being here, to our planning commissioners as well, and to the members of the public. And this meeting is now adjourned.